This is the Biblical Mind Podcast, produced by the Center for Hebraic Thought. Honest 5-star reviews help others find this podcast. Visit the magazine at thebiblicalmind.org for articles and videos that explore the deep structures of Scripture.
Well, for me, it started. My interest in the Bible started actually with the prophets, because of all the social justice issues that you can find it in there. But then once I kind of saw the foundations for what they were saying, I moved a little bit to creation theology. So like moving to Genesis 1, trying to understand what's the purpose of creation and what God is doing with humanity. But once I got to Genesis 1 and dealing with all these creation issues, some of the materials that I was reading was all the time relating Genesis 1 to, Leviticus and the Tabernacle and the coat, because, if you study the Bible, you know that Genesis 1 is priestly theology that you can find in those other books in the Pentateuch. And what interested, the things that caught my attention in this relation between creation and cult and sacrifices that you see in Exodus and Leviticus is how real life experiences are related to our relationship with God. So,
what do you mean by that?
Well, you're dealing with food. You're dealing with social dynamics within the family. You are dealing with resources, human resources and material resources, and you're getting all these things, and you are putting in a context of worship, and that's how I saw the foundation, like the theological foundation for all the social issues that the prophets were dealing with, because you're all the time dealing with human and material resources that is seen as a gift from God, and that you're giving it back to God, but at the same time, in the process, you have to know how to use them in a way that is beneficial for other people.
So if I can trace a couple of the moves you just made for people who don't do biblical studies, because they're going to say, how is that Genesis 1 thing related again? Is what a lot of scholars have noticed. People will divide these up into sources, but even if you don't divide them into sources, you notice there's some kind of sanctuaryism going on in those creation texts that then are at least mimicked or in some way reflect or resemble what's going on in creation. It then seems to port over a little bit into the temple, the tabernacle, and then temple. And then that move you just made towards the end there was, and it won't, I don't think this will strike people as odd as it is, but that the daily life of Israel is mixed with their worship, so that what they do in the temple or tabernacle is directly pertinent to how they raise their crops, grow their food, wear their clothes, treat their animals. Why is that interesting in the ancient world, I guess? Because most people are like, of course our worship has to do with the rest of our lives.
Yeah. Well,
and maybe I can throw on there, and what does that have to do with justice? Justice for the poor, for the weak, for the vulnerable?
Yeah, the relationship between this real life experiences or the concrete ways of our living, be it in ancient Israel or today, and how we use our human resources and material resources, and in a context of worship, or in how we relate to God. And the justice issue in this matter is how we, how we received a gift and we pass it on. I think this kind of like cycle of the gift, of divine gift, and how, like in ancient Israel, in this priestly theology of worship, or priestly theology of the cult.
And when you say cult, you just mean like the offering of sacrifice. You don't. It is confused in American English with the occult and dark arts.
I know. Like,
Cult just means this is how they did their worship stuff. Yeah.
yeah, but what's the best word for that then?
It is cult, but it's a term that most Americans aren't familiar as a technical term. And it has nothing to do with like
Yeah,
Satanism or darkness
yeah.
or Jim Jones or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just to be clear.
yeah. So like, when you read all of the sacrificial laws, and some of the laws related to the worship in ancient Israel, there's no division between what you do to God and what you do to, like, your fellow human beings, or your neighbor, and or your brother, as it is commonly used in Leviticus, and Exodus, and Deuteronomy. You can get this, like, sacred material that you're going to sacrifice, and you also, this sanctity, or this holy portion, can also be given to the poor, or to the widow, or to the orphan. There's no division between what I give it to God, and or how I use this material to the benefit of those who are more vulnerable, of those who are in need. Of course, we have in the sacrificial laws a division between the materials, but the materials that go to God, the materials that are eaten, the materials that are given to the poor, or the needy, are all sacred. They are all holy, because they are given by God, and they need to return to God, be it in a sacrifice or a worship experience, or be it by using it for God's purpose, for creation and for other people.
And do you see this kind of thinking, if we can say the biblical authors here have a way of thinking about the gifts of God and how we return those gifts to God, to the priest, to also our fellow humans, including the poor, or those maybe who aren't the poor right now but fall into poverty? Do you see continuity with what Jesus teaches in the New Testament, or what Paul says?
I think so. Like, especially, like, from the top of my mind, like, especially when I think about Paul, and I really enjoy, like, looking for sacrificial metaphors in the New Testament. And one that I really enjoy is Romans 12, verses 1 and 2, when Paul says that your bodies are living sacrifices, and that we need to offer it. And after that, I mean, you think that he will come up with a lot of, like, things related to, like, worship services and the church. And he does that, like, he's speaking about the church there, but, like, he's very into social relationships and what we need to do to other people. And then you have all this the tension in the Roman church of the weak and the strong, and how do you deal with this tension, and how do you deal with the differences between the social status among the people who are members of the church. But he starts off with a sacrificial metaphor. So I see in the same way, like, how we use our life energy, and how we offer we offer it up for God in the way that we deal with people in matters that we can absolutely define as social issues.
Yeah, and would you put Jesus's teaching, leave your gift at the altar and go be reconciled, in a similar category here, or you think that's something else going on?
Yeah, well, that's well. Let me say this. I think it is related. I think Jesus has a theology of worship, or how we must worship God, that is very much related to how we deal with other people. Um, but I think Jesus is but because of the event in the temple when he's expelling people from selling
Right.
animals and exchange
Whipping them
coins and stuff.
flipping the tables. Yep.
I know this. I mean, this event is very difficult to understand. There's a lot of debate in the academy about it, but I cannot help myself thinking about how Jesus is expelling those who are like the priests selling the good animals, like for the sacrifice. And as you know, all this thing about why people offer animals or offer this grains and things that they actually worked and gave a lot of their work and effort to make these things grow, be it an animal or be it a grain or a plant. And what I see Jesus doing there is relating the offer to the offering in a way that cannot be mediated by kind of like a financial exchange,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So this is and like food production and animal breeding and shepherding or whatever. It is a social issue because it depends on family dynamics. It depends on community dynamics. Like there's no individual that can be responsible for all these things to happen.
Yeah,
So
nobody can have their own. Nobody can go live the single life with their own apartment and their own TV and order out, right? Yeah, everybody has to
exactly.
be all hands on deck to make the food happen.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
like when you like transform the offerings and the sacrifices to a matter of financial exchange that you can pursue at the temple, like the good and the perfect animal that is approved by the priest. I guess you are moving away from the purpose of the offering, and part of the purpose of the offering is related to how these things are produced, and how these things are social related and includes social issues.
You're a Brazilian by birth.
Yeah.
Though you've lived in Europe for a little while, and we just talked about before this that you took a massive road trip across the United States. Bravo to you. Where are you in Brazil? What city are you in? São Paulo now?
I'm in São Paulo. That's the largest city here.
I think it's the largest city in North and South America.
Yeah,
correct?
it's one of the largest in the whole world. I don't know, probably the fifth largest city in the world.
Yes, it is. It is massive.
It is.
And having spent some time in Brazil myself, I think one of the things that, and spending time in the majority world, I think most Americans realize like, oh, poverty in America is not the same as poverty in other places. And so as kind of Christians going about your day, we talk about favelas, which The unfortunate translation of favela is a slum, but these are communities of very poor people that have kind of stratified. Sometimes they make their own law. Sometimes they have their own police. The police don't even go into some of these favelas. But it's not like you can avoid these communities as you're going about your life in Brazil. And the same way, like in New York City, where I'm at, you can't avoid the homeless. They're right there on the street, looking you in the eye, and you have the opportunity to say, how is your location in Brazil as a theologian, a biblical theologian? How do you think that being a Brazilian biblical theologian is different than being an American, or how you can help American sisters and brothers understand their own scripture better from your perspective?
Yeah. Well, let me say this, like for personally, I could live my life kind of like ignoring all this stuff, because that's what most of the people who are kind of like middle class or higher middle class or rich people here in Brazil, that's how they live their lives. And Christian or non-Christians, that's how they do it. And I was just like that. I was doing, like, in my late teens, beginning of my 20s. I mean, I could drive my car through the city and absolutely ignore all of those people and ignore the favelas that I was passing by. And that's why this is kind of like personal. I don't think this is something that all Brazilians could relate to. But what happened in my life is that I got married to my wife, who came to Brazil to do like a short-term missionary work with children at risk in a nearby region here in São Paulo. And when we got married, we both went as missionaries to work with children at risk. And for the first time in my life, I went to the streets, not passing by and going on with my life, but I went to the streets as a missionary, like with this group that is going to do like evangelism and just like kind of like relating to people on the streets. And for the first time in my life, then, instead of just passing by, I was actually forced, kind of, although I was there voluntarily, I was forced to see those people, and I was forced to smell the same smells that they were smelling, to be in the same space as they were, and getting to know them. And that, for me, it changed everything, because once you see it, and I think this is a very much biblical theme. Once you see it, you are involved. You know, you are related to that, and you must commit, or you just go and run away, and you forget that you saw that. So for me, the experience of seeing those people, getting to know their names, and working with them at the beginning, but once you develop a relationship, you're not so much working with them. We are like kind of living with them for a 2-year period. We were living at the same house as teenage moms who came out of the streets because they need a place to stay with their newborn babies. So you're not anymore so much working with them, you are living with them. And for me, that changed how I saw the Bible. That changed how I understood my Christian faith. And I guess, so that's not like, I know that Brazil, like living in Brazil and being a Brazilian, made this much more a possibility for me than if I would be living in the States, or if I would be living in Holland, as my wife is Dutch. Being Brazil made this possible. But what really, I guess, the perspective that I have on the Bible and on theology is much more related to my experience with people in need, people in extreme poverty, people who are experience violence and need every day, people who do not know if they're gonna have a meal to eat today, or probably not even tomorrow. And that made me see what God is doing in the biblical narrative and in our world in a different way, much more related to real life experiences of those who are desperately in need of God's help, which in most of the cases are the help of the church or the help of people who sees them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very. I run into this problem every semester when I'm teaching, and I say this all the time: is these young college students who live better than medieval kings is the example I give. But they call themselves poor college students, and then we're looking at the biblical text, and when they think the poor, even in some ways we'd have to say even the homeless on the streets of New York have resources, they have places they can go. There's a kind of poverty and desperation in the biblical text that is actually kind of untouchable from the American context, just because we're so resource rich, and even most of the Americas, we could say it's not really even the same kind of poverty we're talking about. So how do you get someone to imagine that kind of desperation where the food might not be coming and might not be coming for months if the crops fail and we don't diversify properly? So I know we've had conversations in the past where I felt like one of the things I've always appreciated about your thinking and your writing is that you seem to fully appreciate the embodied situation of ancient Israel, and also want to think always about how that applies to the embodied people we encounter today, and especially people who suffered deep traumas, which through most ages of Israelite history, you're talking really about traumatized people. And I think in American community, a lot of poor African Americans have, I live in Newark, and there's entire communities that you think like everybody in the community has been traumatized, and they're not even post-traumatic. They're kind of still facing traumas every day. I wonder for a largely American audience who listens to this, I wonder what is the hope we have from Scripture? What do you glean from Scripture that might help us to think about the people around us who have suffered traumas or are in desperate situations? Maybe even the guidance, you would say, like what should it teach us how to be different than what we are right now?
Well, I think the first step is taking my personal experience as a kind of like a model. I think we need to know and experience these people or the lives that these people have, because although like in Western thought we are advanced in our way of thinking about the body, like there's a whole kind of like subgenre of philosophy that are dealing with the body and the meaning of the body. But one thing is to speak about it, and the other thing is to have all the resources that you need for your body so you can think about other stuff. But once you are in desperate need of material resources, you are actually living the bodily experience, I guess. So I would say this, like for Christians, we need to get involved and relate to real real human experiences of bodily needs. And I guess the Christian tradition, the liturgy, and theology offer a lot of help for us in by means, for example, of fasting. I mean, once you are actually putting your body into a situation of how to say deprivation, not deprivation, of
Deprivation, yeah, like physical need, yeah.
physical need, like putting your body into deprivation, you start to realize how embodied you are. And that might be an experience, a shared experience with those who are in the same situation, but not because they want it, not because they are doing a spiritual discipline, but just because that's how their lives are. And I guess the church is such a great place to get different people together and making life's experience, like share life's experience, give meaning to how they worship God and how they read the Bible and how they do theology. So I guess maybe Christians should really get involved with different people, and especially those who are in most need, in an environment that is that leads them to think better about what God is doing and who God is and how God is revealed in Scriptures.
Yeah, and I think that involvement, from my own personal experience, it changes the way you read. In the same way that going to Israel and Jordan and seeing the land where all this stuff happened, it fundamentally changes the way you read Scripture from that point on.
Yeah.
The same thing with getting to know those people in need in your communities. It really changes what stands out on the page. And reading the Bible becomes less of an exercise of all individualistic self, like what is God trying to say to me today, and more how God might be trying to point us away from ourselves out to others, if I hear you correctly.
Yeah, that's it. I think, as we all know, like social location is so important and kind of like defines how we read the Bible. For example, before I became a father of two adopted children, I would never get to go to the Bible and see adoption metaphors in the same way that I do today, or seeing really the narrative of how God relates to Israel in the Old Testament, and really seeing that this is adoptive relationship. This is not like a biological parenthood. This is adoptive parenthood. And that's why we are desperately in need of different voices from different social locations, so we can really enjoy the whole richness of the biblical narrative of the whole Bible.
Yeah, mutually enriching conversations where we learn more because of different perspectives.
Yeah.
Well, Caio, thank you very much for your time. Caio's written a few essays, and there's one more to come in his series. It's fantastic investigation of how the text of Moses, the Torah, are exploring very difficult themes with the outsider, the insider dynamics, social dynamics, in all kinds of ways. It's brilliant work, and it'll be in both Portuguese and English for those of you that are interested to pass it along to your Brazilian and other Portuguese-speaking friends. Thank you very much for your time, Caio, all the way from São Paulo.
Yeah, thank you, Drew. It was an honor.
You've been listening to the Biblical Mind podcast, exploring the deep structures of Christian scripture. For more, visit the magazine at thebiblicalmind.org. Subscribe to this podcast at all the usual places so you never miss an episode.